What's going on, you guys? My name's Ty Knots and welcome to Top 5 Unknowns, 5 3am stories found on Reddit. Number 5. People get creepy calls all the time, but for me it wasn't just one call, it was multiple. Until about a year or two ago, I still had an older slide phone. One day I got a random call asking for some girl named Sarah. I told them they had the wrong number and they immediately hung up. For the next month, I would get these calls asking for Sarah about once or twice a week. Sometimes these calls would come at 3 in the morning. One day I got a call and like usual, I said I didn't know Sarah. And after they hung up, I went to my contacts and hit redial. After I did, the machine took over and said that the number didn't exist. I went back through my call history trying to call some other people that had called me with the same result, a machine telling me that the number didn't exist. I googled the numbers, but all I learned is that they were coming from North Dakota. I started wondering what was going on, so next time I got a call asking for Sarah, I said, "Oh yeah, she's right here." And the person on the other end said, "No she isn't," and hung up. Then things started to get weird and I started getting calls from unknown numbers. Whoever and whatever was on the other end was hanging up the second I said hello. The creepiest one that I ever got was a call where they didn't hang up after I said hello. I could just hear someone on the other end listening, but they didn't say anything. Just something really uneasy about it. Eventually I switched from a smartphone and I immediately stopped getting the calls. I haven't gotten a random call in almost 2 years now. It was so strange. Number 4. It was 3 AM on a Saturday. I was working in the emergency room of a level 1 trauma center and we had 3 people coming in after a gunfight. We only had about 2 beds designated for severe trauma, so there was the typical discussion of which 2 people to try to stabilize and which person to delegate to the makeshift trauma bay. Do we focus on the most severely injured or the 2 most likely to survive? Well, the first person wheeled in just didn't seem to have a head. There was a bloody mass at the top of his neck, but it didn't look human. I remember being so confused that we were using one of the bays for this person, because there's just no way that he could still be alive. I was looking him over and noticed that he kept clicking the knuckles on his left thumb. He would just squeeze one finger rhythmically and then work down the other 4 and start over. He didn't seem to have any sort of actual anatomy left, but somehow he was just sitting here cracking his knuckles. I didn't make any sense of it. He didn't stay alive much longer except for maybe a couple hours, but that knuckle cracking seemed like such a human thing to do for someone that had no reason to still be alive. Number 3. I was hunting in northern Ontario. There were no roads within about 130 kilometers and it was late into bear season, so no one was out hunting in my quadrant. I found a nice campsite alongside a river and hunted from there. On the second day of my hunt, I came across bear tracks and I tracked them for about 2 hours and then turned around. This is when things got weird. I always track on one side of the tracks and return to the other. I was about 200 meters down the east side of the tracks and I ran into other human footprints which disappeared across the trail and into the woods on the left. My dog didn't seem to smell anything, so I just returned to camp with minimal concern. I got back to camp around 7:30 at night and made a quick dinner and had a cigar by the campfire. At around 12 that night, I heard the snap of a branch. After hunting for almost 20 years, only 2 things snap branches: bears and humans. I grabbed my firearm and a flashlight and went out after the noise. Every 100 yards, I would scan with the flashlight. My dog eventually freaked out and started growling and advancing into the woods slowly. I pulled back on his leash to slow his advance and switched on my flashlight again. I saw a pair of eyes looking right at me. We stared for about 5 seconds and then he disappeared into the woods. On the walk back, I felt anxious, scared, and uncomfortable. I could just feel someone watching me. That next night, the exact same thing happened. My dog went wild like I'd never seen him. He was whimpering, growling, and clearly very anxious. At this point, I was terrified. I didn't go hunting that day and didn't close my eyes once. That night, I sat up with my flashlight, constantly scanning the tree line. I guess I dozed off around 1 and woke up at 3. I was sweating, confused, and very scared. I scanned the forest again and just barely visible about 25 yards in the forest, there's a man with his dog. He was looking right at me. I started to approach him and started shouting to him. I got within 10 feet and he looked awfully disheveled and stank. The worst part was that he just stared at me and smiled. His eyes showed zero emotion and he just whispered goodnight. I ran back to my tent, packed it into my pack, loaded it into my trailer of the ATV, and just drove out of there. Number 2. It was 3 AM one night and I woke up for some reason that I couldn't place. I went to get a drink of water since I figured I was already awake, and I heard the dog whining at the back door, so I went to investigate. I stepped outside and heard the most bizarre, unexplainable noise I've heard in my entire life. I thought it was a car at first. It was like a high-pitched buzzing or a whining kind of sound. I thought some idiots were racing down our street until it got louder and louder. It seemed to be echoing, so I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from other than above. After a couple seconds, it just stopped. My dog stopped whimpering and insects started making noise again, and I never heard anything about it from anyone. It was so unbelievably bizarre. I actually managed to capture a video of it. Take a look. Number 1. Usually when I drink, there's nothing in the world that will wake me up. My head hits the pillow and that's where it'll remain until the sun comes up. So I don't know why it didn't happen on this particular night. Maybe it was the feel of this house, but I woke up around 3 AM to a quiet giggle, like a grown man laughing. I thought maybe my boyfriend was just giggling in his sleep, but then the giggling started getting louder. It sounded like it was coming from outside of our window. The window was located just behind the bed above our heads, so I snuck up to see if I could see anything, but there was absolutely nothing. There's no one out there, but it did go quiet. So I was just about to go back to sleep, but then it started right back up again. This time I knew it wasn't my boyfriend, and I knew it wasn't the other couple. The giggling grew louder and louder until it was just full-blown hysterical laughter, right outside our bedroom window. I felt my boyfriend's hand clench mine. I didn't even know he was still awake. He asked if I saw anything out there and I said no. The laughing finally stopped after about 15 minutes. We stayed up until about 4 AM looking outside the window, making sure the laughter didn't come back. We finally went back to sleep, and the next morning we asked the other couple if they'd heard anything, but they said they hadn't. In fact, they thought we were crazy. One of them suggested that I dreamt it, but how did my boyfriend and I both dream that some random person was laughing their heads off outside our bedroom window? I'll never understand. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos.